G'day YouTube, we've just finished tightening our final nuts and bolts and doing the last checks on our running procedure for the CB400F Café racer build. This project is obviously inspired by our green CB400 Café racer from a few years back, with a decidedly modern twist. Now we've had the opportunity with this project to not only style it out, but really dig into the performance and build the engine on it. I'm about to take you through exactly what we've done. I'm Tom Gilroy, you're in the purpose-built Moto garage. Let's get into another build rundown. Now you guys know I love a Honda 4 or just a 4-cylinder in general, and my favorite are the mid-size 400s, 450s, 550s. I'm all about them. Nice and small, got a good enough amount of power, and they're a really nice and nimble bike with the frame size. So with this one, having an engine builder in-house, we really wanted to dig in and see what we could get out of this. This engine is the 400 Super Sport, so it's got a 6-speed gearbox, and if you know what you're looking at, the header pipes on the front here give that away. The Super Sport had a swept across 4-into-1 setup that goes underneath the right-hand foot peg. More about that later. Let's get into what Jesse's done on the engine here. So we'd completely stripped this thing down. It was a running bike, but it had a few issues. With that, we took stock on what needed to be replaced and then set about making this thing a high performance engine. We've done that by way of a Forsetti 466 big bore kit. So that gives you new pistons, new rings, and obviously we had to machine the barrels out. We've done a fair bit of head work, so that means porting and polishing on the intakes and exhausts to make sure that the gases are flowing smoothly through this motor. Now the owner didn't want us to upgrade the carbies. Instead, he wanted us to refurbish the old ones, so we've gone in, refurbished them as best we can, and done a little bit of work internally to make sure that they're keeping up with the head work and the new big bore kit that we've done. The bottom end was completely treated to new bearings and seals all the way through. We've cleaned everything out, had the whole setup vapor blasted, replaced the clutch also. Last time we built one of these Honda 4s, we didn't use high performance clutch springs, and as soon as we started test riding it, it blew through the clutch, making a little bit more power than what it was used to. So this time we knew what we were up for, went in and put a high performance clutch in it, and this thing is working incredibly well. I'm really happy with the power output on this thing, and we've done a lot of work to strip a bit of weight off it as well, which has sort of just helped the performance out all around. Now once the engine was completely rebuilt and ready to go back in the frame, we've given it a nice coat of gloss black, put some new intakes on, fitted the carbies up, slotted it in the bike, and then finished the carburetors off with some nice little DNA pod filters. Now the most major piece of the fabrication that we've done on this bike has got to be the tail and monoshock. So as we were tearing the bike down, this wasn't part of the plan initially, but we started to take a few things apart, talk with our client about what he wanted done with the subframe, and I mentioned to him that we could potentially do a monoshock conversion. This isn't something that we've done in a long time now, so I was pretty keen to sort of work it in on one of these bikes. Now when you are going to work something like this into your project, you have to be aware that when you do this, it takes your bike away from that classic restoration cafe racers style, and it makes it look far more modern. There's not really two ways about it. I always think if you're going to do something like this, the bike is going to end up with a modern edge no matter how you try to spin it. We were happy with that direction, and so was our client Will, so we went at it. What we've done is completely remove the subframe and rebuild a super light tail frame. So we've got some 19mm chromoly bar in the strut here, and then some 7/8 chromoly bar that just runs straight under the tail. There's no hoop here. This is all sort of like floating mounted off of 2 straight bars that run directly underneath the seat with a few bits of bracing. Now with that, we've removed a lot of the weight out of the old subframe. We've got a light fiberglass tail, fiberglass seat pan, all that sort of stuff. But the real work began when we had to redo the suspension. So what we've done here is utilize the old twin shock mounts on the swing arm. So we've cut those out, made a set of weld-on slugs here, and then used those to build our swing arm braces off. The monoshock bracing is a hooped style that runs up over here, and then it's braced down to the front of the swing arm. This sort of triangulates the shock mount, and also you got to be careful of your placement and that it's going to allow proper suspension movement. As your wheel travels up, it travels in towards there. There's a fair bit in this, which I can't really get into in super fine detail here, but when you're doing it, you just have to make sure that you're doing it right and making it work properly, which is the ultimate goal when you're working on bikes like this. In terms of the rear shock, it was easily enough braced, so I'm not going to remove the tank and stuff, but we've got a fairly hefty brace up there that runs on the backbone of the CB400F. So we've used like some 8mm mild steel plate and braced that for the front mount, and then made in a nice, really clean shock mount here. We'll get you on the other side for a close-up of how that all works. When we'd finished with this, what we do is use a solid bar as in place of our rear shock, and then we can send photos to our suspension guys to have the shock built. So this one came directly from Suspensions Are Us, that are a distributor for YSS suspension in Australia. Sent them the photos, the measurements and the weight of the bike, and then they had it dialed in and sent to us within a couple of days. On top of the custom subframe that we've built, we've got a nice fiberglass tail cowl, Justin at Pop Lane Classics. We used this on the last project that we did. I love them so much, I thought we'd run it again. Don't mess with perfection. So that made our life easy on the fabrication of the tail. We only had to get the mounting done. We've got our hollow tip LED 3-in-1 indicators. These are acting as the brake, tail and turn signal on the back here, nicely mounted in tight, and a custom seat. So we've shaped this up. It's got a nice sort of like reveal of the frame here. We put a bit of like an arc in the side of the seat and sent it to Jamison from Timeless Auto Trim, who's trimmed it out in a nice black leather. Did a bit of a weird diamond design on this one, but the rest of the bike is fairly simple, so I felt like we could play with the design of the seat a little bit and it wasn't going to overdo anything. Now, under the seat, we've got a custom tank mount here, so we could create a bit of room, a seat bracing, and then the black box with our wiring setup. This module makes everything nice and easy when you're wiring up old vintage bikes, restorations, cafe races, all that sort of stuff. Dylan actually wired this entire project. That's how easy it is. That's my fabricator here. You guys should know him by now, but that just sort of illustrates how simple this system is to use. He hasn't got any experience and got the job done really well. Rounding out the tail fabrication, we've got a really nice swing arm mounted tail tidy here. We wanted to keep the tail really nice and short on this. Didn't want to impede it with a number plate bracket and lights and stuff like that. So we've left that super clean, mounted it down here, which will sort of act as a bit of a mudguard as well. Moving on to the wheels, we've got the standard hubs front and back. Those have been stripped, rebuilt and powder coated, and then relaced to some 18-inch black XL rims using stainless steel spokes. Now we're running the same size tires front and back on this bike. We did it on our last project too. I really like the look of the way that that came out. A little bike with some big fat tires on. They have a good profile, they handle well, and we're running 4.00 18s. The battery and regulator rectifier on this bike is hidden neatly underneath the swing arm. We've fabricated a custom sheet metal box under there to tuck all of that away because we didn't have a lot of room up in here to work with. Now on the front end electrics, we have two 3-button handlebar switches here. We've upgraded our levers to some Akasato. You've got a cable clutch, hydraulic front brake here. These give you a really nice brake feel. We've actually updated our door to include the Akasato RCS lever, which is an adjustable lever. It gives you a lot more options when it comes to the brake feel on your bike. It's really helpful when you're sort of retrofitting it onto bikes that potentially they wouldn't normally go on. So it was a good addition for our store and we've been using them quite a lot lately. On the front, the gauge setup was kept bare bones as minimal as possible. So we have a 60mm Daytona Valona with a built-in dash lights and then a tiny little key mounted next to it. So we wanted to run a set of riser bars on this. The rider didn't want to be rolling around with clip-ons because it's a little too low for him. So we've just used some really low rise steel bars, kept everything as simple as possible, and I think the bar section on this bike has turned out really, really nicely. So the forks on this bike were completely rebuilt. We had Jesse, our engine builder, handle this. They were re-sprung, and then we've also got some new caps. So these offer adjustability in your preload. So, I mean, while you don't have ultimate adjustability on a front end from the mid-1970s, this gives you a little bit more control on how your ride feels. Moving on to the front lighting, we've got our 5.75 inch classic headlight LED mounted up super close. We've actually utilized a bottom mount on here, so because you've got a steel bottom triple clamp on these, we're able to weld some brackets on and pivot that off nicely, and then that freed up the side mounts to use our hollow tip LED indicators. Again, this keeps the front end set up super clean, everything's nice, you've got very minimal bracketry, and it allows you to fit your headlight up super nice and close onto the forks there. Next job was our front fender. This has been fabricated using only parts out of our front fender fabrication kit. You've got some bar work, a few fabrication bungs, link it up on your bike, bend up the bars how you like them. The style can be yours to make. Weld them together, have them powder coated, painted, job is done. So Dylan's done a really nice triangular job on this one. He's been liking these mounts a lot lately. You'll see him on a couple of our upcoming projects. It's a nice way to get it done with only a single mount on the front of the fork. Again, keeping it nice and simple, but it does the job really effectively. Now, if you've ever ridden a Honda from the mid 1970s or even through the 80s, you know their brakes are horrendous. So we decided to do something about it. We've stripped off the old caliper mount and remounted a later model Tokiko twin pot caliper. These come off an SV650 and we've just made it work with the factory disc. So this has been machined and refaced, cleaned up because it was in pretty poor shape, but still plenty of thickness there. So we've made this work with our new SV650 caliper, and the braking is so far superior on this bike than what it used to be. It's a joy to ride. Usually you're heading in the corner, braking on hopes and dreams, but this thing gives you a really good amount of control, especially with the braided lines and Akasato levers that we've got. It feels like a modern bike. Final few details on the CB400 Café racer. We've retrofitted a modern style set of foot pegs here. These are actually built for a Triumph, like a late model Bonneville, but the mounts are almost identical, so they fit up really easily. So that was done, and then we went about restoring the exhaust. The CB400 Super 4 exhaust is an iconic sort of setup that a lot of people are after, even if they don't have the correct model. So we wanted to make sure we could retain that. Now, they were in really bad shape, so we had to do a lot of work, and these header pipes, especially under the engine here, have been cut and repaired and resurfaced, you know, dent removed. So there quite a lot of work went into that, but I think the end result is really worth it. So we've mounted it up to one of our little torpedo mufflers, and the sound out of this thing, which you guys will hear in a sec, I promise, is unbelievable. Honda 4s sound awesome all the time, but these things with a little muffler sound so, so nice. Now, the last thing I've got to take you guys through is the paintwork. Now, as per usual, when it comes to paint, I try to hold off our clients on making a decision until they can see their bike nearly finished in the metal. So basically, the process goes with us most of the time is that we'll have all the fabrication finished. So basically, you're looking at a blank canvas here. And then I say to the guy, Will, what are you thinking about paint? We throw around a few ideas, and I suggested to him that we run with a midnight purple. So the bike was taking shape. We'd started to put a lot of black parts on it, and I was really feeling the sort of dark and moody style of where this was going. So I suggested that we use a Skyline GTR purple, but we made it a few shades darker. So I run around to my mate's shop, Nathan, from Livin' Loco, went through a few colors. He understood the assignment and got to work. Turned out this incredible paint job. So there was a few repairs to do on the tank, which he hated and was swearing at me about, but that's old bikes. So he's done the body repairs and then laid down this beautiful purple paint job. Now, you probably haven't noticed it so far, but the paint actually has a few black detailing. So over the top here on the body lines, we've got some nice pinstriping. We've got a logo on the tail and a nice little Honda logo on the front of the tank. So let me grab my phone light. I'll get Brandon to zoom in for you so you don't miss those details. The phone light wasn't really cutting it, so we brought out the big guns. Have a look at this. Hold on, you ready? See that? Yeah. So you've got that on the tank there. This will only be sort of really visible in the sunlight. So, but I like putting those little hidden details on. It's a cool touch. And then on the tail here, we've got like the little PBM shop logo, of course. Got to know where your food's coming from, lovely. I'm gonna give the CB400 a start now. As per usual, I'll chuck a GoPro on and head through the hills so you guys can get a bit of a cockpit view of how this thing rides. Now you may have noticed this little thing creeping around in our videos. She's gonna run off in a second because she doesn't really like the sound of bikes. This is our new shop pup, Lola. She'll be distracting us, getting in all of our videos and disturbing the peace in the workshop from now on, so get used to this cute little face. You'll be seeing her around a lot more. All right, see you, Lola. Purpose-Built Moto's built a great community of both riders and builders around what we do. Whether you love our builds, you use our parts on your project, or you're just here for the content that we create on social media, thanks for being part of our tribe. Next time you're in the garage planning out your build, or you're just tinkering around, make sure you jump on to purposebuiltmoto.com, support the cause and grab a few parts for your pride and joy.